Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss, comedian extraordinaire. Before we get started, let me say Ramadan Mubarak. In advance, I'm hoping that everybody has a successful fast. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm here today to talk about the Islamic City 30-day challenge to love Allah more. What does that mean, Preacher? It means that we're all going to talk about the different ways that we can love Allah more, that we can dedicate ourselves and devote ourselves to the Most High, and in this special time of the year, Ramadan, get closer to our Lord. Now, the way I'm going to love a lot more, brothers and sisters, is I'm going to focus on correctness. Self-correctness, emotional correctness, spiritual correctness. Because I believe in this way I get closer to my Lord because I'm a lot more humble and a lot more open to His mercy and His wisdom. This was a big thing for me when I became Muslim, about self-correction, especially growing up in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, hearing all the noise about what I was supposed to be as a young black man, as a young black boy. And I found this calm, if you will. This calm that was passed down for me, from my relatives, my mom, my dad, all my relatives. It was that whole idea that we could self-correct ourselves. And I found this peace in the religion of Al-Islam. Now, you can't do what I'm going to do. I mean, don't copycat. Make your own video. I already said I'm going to love a lot more because I'm going to focus on self-correction. You have an opportunity to make your own video and talk about how you are going to love a lot more. That's right. So what are you standing there for? You got a limited amount of time. Ramadan is starting in like 15 minutes. I believe that you should get out and try to figure out how you're going to love a lot more. Make a video, 2-3 minutes. Join the challenge for Islamic City to love a lot more. I'm Preacher Moss. In advance, Ramadan Mubarak, and I'll be seeing you throughout this 30 days. Take care.
Moss, I hope all is well and you're doing well and in good spirits. For those that are tuning in, Ramadan Mubarak. Hope that, again, you're having a great day. Today's topic, first of all, there's no overlay today. First of all, there's no overlay today. I'm going to ask Satana just to go old school and put our subject of today on the screen, which is why we need parents. Again, that's why we need parents. Before I get started, let me go ahead and get some shout outs. One of our dear sisters, Sister Ree, is under the weather, not feeling well. So, Sister Ree, we hope you're doing well. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To you, dear sister, feel better. We pray Allah give you shifa and peace and blessings, of course, to Derek and Juan. Also, I want to give a shout out to my main man, Eric Carter. What's going on, beloved? Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Making sure that you join in with the family. We appreciate your engagement. We also appreciate your loyalty, young man. We appreciate you. Next up, my main man, Altaf Rashid. What's going on, beloved? Appreciate you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tuning in from Toronto, our Canadian envoy to the show. Always a pleasure to see you in our comment section and, of course, in our Shout Out Show family. And, of course, my main man, Big Brother, what's going on? Bilal Salahuddin and his lovely queens, Sonia, Sister Sonia Salahuddin. What's going on? Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very important. Very important. And, of course, we'll give a shout out to Sister Satana. Let me apologize again. Publicly, Sister Satana, we were supposed to do a shoot today, but I was a little, I want to say under the weather. Allergies are back. So, not that that's an excuse. I just slept, and I have to say, I think I really needed sleep. They say your body has rights. I think I really needed that sleep because I was struggling in a major way earlier today. And sometimes your body's, let's just shut it down. So it did what it did, and it spoke and I obeyed. So this whole concept, why we need parents. The reason I came up with this topic is that it's really been it's been burning in my conscience for quite some time. And it's a whole aspect of the commercialization of parents being moved out of the parental space. Shout out to my little brother, JT, an excellent parent. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, beloved. Thank you for tuning in. I am coursed to be around a lot of extremely gifted parents. Like we talk about gifted children, we don't talk about gifted parents and what that means in terms of procedural understanding how you raise not just children, but you raise communities. Um, the number one reason, and I'll start with the number one. Well, I'm not going to put them in any category. I'm no level of importance. They're all important. One of the biggest reasons why you need parents is that there has to be a temporal understanding of procedure, of process. Like children have to be able to see themselves in a role when they look down the road 10, 15. If you were around your parents and you were 5 and you saw your parents when they were 25 or they were 35 or 45, it gave you a bit of a benchmark in terms of where maturity had to happen. Now, this is not a thing about, good parents, bad parents. I'm just talking about the psychological understanding that one day I potentially could be that person that I'm following. Whether it's your father, it's your mother, it was extremely important to have a typical understanding that this person I'm looking at that's bigger than me is not just a regular person. It's not just my first friend, if you will, my first teacher. Those things are all important. But in the world of the metaphysical, if you will, work with me here. In the world of the metaphysical, you began to understand that this is a process that has preceded you thousands of years, millions of years. We've watched people, even going back to the aspect of animals raising the children, that there is that cord there. Everybody can't raise everybody else's kid, and this is really, really important. But the reason I brought this up because I was watching a show, and I watched a show and they talked about the breakdown of the modern family. And the breakdown of the modern family is interesting because they talked about how the paradigm has shifted in the context is normally parents raise their kids and they have to step back from their kids so they can be adults. The paradigm has shifted whereby children are putting themselves in parental roles and they are disengaging from their parents. Statistics show that in terms of parents, kids who that disengage from their parents, separate from the parents. And when I say that, it means they have no contact, they want no relationship. 7% that happens with the mom. 7% of children they don't want to deal with the mom. 25% don't want to deal with the dad. Now, these numbers may not sound impressive, but if you look at it, that's a lot of people. Just in the United States, you're talking about a paradigm shift of over 65 to 70 million people who are not dealing with the people who brought them into this world, who gave them life. And furthermore, it seems that the collective around parenting these days, and let me be very careful, the collective around parenting these days has become increasingly watered down. That has become more and more difficult to parent your children. I worked in the social services arena when I first came out of college, and what we were dealing with then was the crack wars in Washington, D.C. And the crack wars we felt were breaking down the family because you had core families that were dealing with drug dependency, the drug wars right outside of their door, and the streets, quote unquote, raising their children. It wasn't the streets raising their children. It was the streets offering a substitute in terms of core values. That money, quick fame, girls, cars, materialistic things, this was the life for them. And the reason why it happened is because there is a pause, brothers and sisters. There's a pause. Two things happen. Um, in 84 and 80, two things happened. Number one, there was a dramatic drop in childbirths. A dramatic drop in childbirths. So you were not having the people still having children, but it wasn't at the amount. So what happens is the demand for parenting goes down because there's not as many children. So follow me here. The demand for parenting goes down. What that also says is you now have a system that has a void in it. And in that void, you had things like materialism, you had hedonism, you had the idea that self gratification had to be quick and it had to be immediate, and that becomes the new core value. At the same time, and I want to make sure I get this right, at the same time, the courts began more and more and more instigating and injecting itself in the ability of parents' ability to raise their children, particularly in the social services space. This is important because in the social services space, it now becomes incumbent that you have to have outside sources, social workers, probation workers, juvenile correction work. You have to bring in a group of people that don't necessarily have your child's best interest at heart. They have a job to do. And the job is really contingent on the fact that dysfunction is apparent. Dysfunction is working at a very, very high rate. And what was going on is the ability of the parents becomes muted because they have to go through all of these systems. They have to go through this lawyer. They have to go through this social worker. They have to go through this judge. Now, this was apparent, and of course, like I said, the mid to late 80s, it built steam. But on the other side, you had the breakup of modern marriage. And I don't care what anybody says, I can be wrong, but it's extremely difficult to raise children when the mother's over here and the father's over here. Listen to me. It's extremely hard to raise children. Mother's over here, father's over here. Everybody's not in the same house. And the reason I say this is because there's not a balance of core values that's going on in the house. That if mommy says something and daddy says something, there's a space where we can have a discussion about what's valid. We can talk about the conversation, communication that you're going to put around your kids. And then the last thing that happens, which is big, and we'll take a deep dive into this, it's the inference that we trusted educational protocols that we didn't understand. I earlier said that the parent is the first teacher. The mother is the first teacher, but the parents are the first teacher. They're the first friends. And what happened is the ideology of school and education, it fell off track. What I mean it fell off track is that it wasn't as directed anymore. The idea of school vouchers, the idea of getting rid of or altering community or community education, community schooling, it furthermore hampers the ability of the parent to, I want to say, have the proximity to the child's education. The idea of being able to go home, walk to the school, or drive close to the school, and the idea that there are a thing about parental rights. There's a thing about parental rights. Let me break it down to you. See the old TV shows, Good Times, Jeffersons, All in the Family. There was a thing, and I think it happened around All of the Family, but there was a thing that shows before that. It was inherent that the parents were the ones that were the wisest in the house. They were the smartest in the house. You take it, Leave It the Beaver, My Three Sons, whatever. But the parent maintained, if you will, the final decision. They were the last voice on the decision, and the children were portrayed as children. This is important because the children were portrayed as participants in a discussion, but they didn't make the final decision. They were allowed to present their case, if you will. Oh, Dad, I want to do this. Mom, why I got to do this? But in the end, Mom and Dad had the final word. They said what it was that needed to be said, and you moved on. Not so now. Society created a third rail in parenting, and that third rail is the one that's called television. Now the third rail and fourth rail are called television and social media. But the ideology of television coming to the home and the imposition of workforce necessity, if you will, economic disparity, it required that the work orientation change. So now mom's at work, dads are at work, and you find that the children are being babysat by the TV. That's a very, very common cliche. We say the kids are raised by TV. That's what we said. Kids raised by social media. Let me get really deep on you though. It's not that they were raised by TV. It's that there was a very, very dedicated effort. The same way that when you had cigarettes, there was an issue that with the cigarettes in the filter, they put something in the filter to ensure that there be addiction. The same thing has happened in the aspect of effective parenting. Somebody has put something in the scope of effective parenting whereby things break down. Social media is a bastard child. Can I say bastard child? I can say bastard child. Okay. Thank you, Satana. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Leaving off a bastard child. We'll be right here on the Shout Out Show. Thank you. Okay, so let me apologize right up front. I'm having a Ramadan faux pas today. And what that means is um, I'm not blaming it on Ramadan. It's fasting. I know it's fasting. And I come into this whole thing and I feel good. We feel good. But sometimes our execution is absolutely horrible. Sister Tana had to remind me at the 15-minute mark that maybe we ain't want to open the show. I came on earlier talking about there's no overlay. This is all on me, brothers and sisters. But this is live TV. Um, I almost broke my neck today because I tied my shoes together by accident. Um, yeah, I'm gonna tell it on myself. And when I almost fell, I looked around like somebody had tied the shoes for me. Like someone's trying to hurt me. You know how you do that? You ever walk into a wall and then you question the placement of the wall? It was one of those type of things. And here I am talking about parenting, and we hadn't even gotten to the open. I don't even know we're gonna get a commercial in today. It's one of those things. Forgive me. But let me get back to the fact about why we need parents. We need parents because there's a certain ordering in the stars in the universe. And if you start thinking about your parents, the anthology, the story arc of how your mother over here and your father got together, there is something that's magical that of all the just randomness in the world, that these people can somehow come together in a space of productivity and produce a child. Now, I say parents. I didn't say father and mother. I said parents. Anybody can be a father. Anybody can be a mother. I'm saying, though, parents are different. A dad and a mama, different. When you say so, Satana, so my point, and I know I'm over already. The reason why we need parents is that you can't have meaningful society without them. Everybody is an outgrowth of parenting. We now see, Donald Trump said something about, talking about capital gains tax. He said, if you don't like your kids or your kids don't like you, you don't have to leave the house to them. And I know it was probably a dry run at a joke or something that just didn't hit. But I stepped back and was like, all the things he says that are absolutely ridiculous, he was true on that. He was true on that. Like that actually made sense, and then I got scared. But let me broach this idea. We're gonna take a so time we're gonna take a break and put one of our ads up because I got to do that. Let me offer this in the overall space. You know, the one thing that we don't have caretaking for. We have parenting classes, but you don't have a daddy class. You ain't got a mama class. You ain't got a big mama class, because parenting talks about how you instruct. It doesn't tell you necessarily about how you love the children. It doesn't necessarily tell you about how you sacrifice for your kids. It doesn't necessarily tell you about, hey, when you're not appreciated or you don't feel like you're appreciated by your kids. It doesn't tell you how society is constantly beating down on you as a parent to raise these children. That when you send them out to school or you send them out to the park, that they come back from the park. Think about this, brothers and sisters. Just think about just the Nashville shooting that happened yesterday. Imagine if you're a parent. The Nashville shooting that happened yesterday was the 18th school shooting in 2023. I didn't say 8, I said 18th. And nobody would even flinch. They're talking about over 527 school shootings just in a relatively small amount of time. And you say, how does that happen? Because the parallel is for a child that may be harmed or killed at a school, and a parent has to deal with that. The shooter, guess what they had in common? The shooter had parents. The shooter had parents. The killers had parents. The politicians have parents. The people that say we don't need these guns have parents. And the protocol, which I think we really need to look at, the protocol has been watered down. That the government wants to raise your children. I think of it like the new wave slavery now. In slavery times, you had black kids who, they had the white masters and da. But now it's like black kids were not enough. You need everybody under the thumb of that wicked tutelage. That somehow we don't know what's best for our children. And it boils down to when kids get older that they don't know what's best for themselves. So, Donna, let's take a break while we can get it in. We'll be right back here on the show, on the Shout Out Show.
We just need help.
Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Muslim Family Services at your command. The people who help people have to say, we need your donations, don't delay. We all have struggles from time to time, but leaders dedicated is what you find. Before another person sheds a tear, support Olive Branch, you don't have to fear. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Sing it with me. Ooh. Ooh.
All right, we're back. Shout out to Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. I'm on their board, so let's just have complete transparency. I'm on their board. What I like about Olive Branch Muslim Family Services is the fact that they do have a community-based understanding of need. I would not join their board if I wasn't going to see them in places of need around the city of Houston. If they weren't going to be in 3rd Ward, if they weren't going to be in 5th Ward, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. Yes, they do deal with Afghan resettlement issues, but guess what? A lot of those Afghans in some of the places I just told you about. Giving away food, doing the CDL licensing. I mean, these are important. And the thing that I do like most about Olive Branch Muslim Services and a lot of organizations like that is that when they deal with families, they from the outset, they're trying to figure out a way or a convention to make sure that the parents are strengthened in their decision making. One thing I don't like about a lot of stuff I see in the context of how the government works with families is it's always been a situation where they try to deconstruct the family, break it, and then put it back together. So you can have credit for saying, look, I held the family together. You held the family together, but you broke it up. I don't like the fact that too often that families have been disempowered, that we're not making decisions that we would normally make, or the rubric by which you do it becomes more and more important. Case in point, if you start thinking about college, the scope of college, that parents have to go into debt and students have to go into debt to go to college. I'm like, well, why? Why is that? And it's interesting because, again, this usurps the idea of what parents used to do in syndicate. You used to prepare your children to go to college or higher education. And there was a process of loans and things like that. You took them, but now, it unsettles the parenting going forward. That parents are carrying debt way past when they should. That children watch their parents struggle to take care of them. And of course, at the end, parents are having their children, well, not these days, not as much, but now you have, with the crippling of the economy, now have adult children staying with their parents and dealing with some of the things I talked about, that some of these adult children in the space of their parents are disengaging. They're talking about toxic relationships. They're talking about lack of empathy. They're talking about, you don't give me support or you're too critical. And I'm like, that's what parenting is. You got to stand on your own 2 feet. Now, am I saying that some of the children are soft? Yes, some of them are. But I'm also saying that the parenting that I got and the parenting that many of you got was a solid, I want to say a solid construct. And it allowed us to be who we are today. That you have parents and you have grandparents. And the grandparents molding is so important. The imprint is so prevalent that it rubs off on the grandchildren. That there's a line of consistency. So I just want to go ahead and say that. I'm going to wrap the show a little early today because I have some business to take care of. But I'm going to wrap the show early today, and I want you to really work. Uh-oh. Khan Akram is in the building, sister. What's she say here? The destruction of the family in the United States was instigated in the 1970s with the introduction of Planned Parenthood centers. This would ensure reduction of birth. I talked about that, birth rates. Yeah, really, in the inner city, what they did was they did free condom giveaways. But we'll talk about that later. Yes, the government wants to raise your children to indoctrinate them. And when you go in poor countries, I don't like to say third world countries. You go in poor countries, governments are raising their children. And children are not being parented. You know who's parenting? Military is parenting these kids. Just think about that for a minute. Sister Rabina, thank you so much for jumping on. We're going to get off here a little early. Y'all tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow's show going to be a little light. The title is called Is Preacher Moss Dead? We're going to talk about entertainment. And I'm going to give you guys a little story that we can have a laugh on, all right? A little break away from the Ramadan fasting type of thing. Just something to put a smile on your face. You deserve it. This is Preacher Moss on the ShOUT Show. Thank you so much. Signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.